Ja, moet die blijven lopen?
Moet die aan?
Staat die aan? Ja?
Ja.
Nee, dat is prima.
Ja.
Hey, beste mensen, welkom allemaal. Ik heb iets spannends besloten. En het heeft te maken met de film. Ik ga mezelf opnemen. Want ik vind mezelf heel erg leuk. Dus ik wil mezelf graag rondgieten. Het is ook voor als iemand een keer iets mist, dan kan hij het nog nakijken. Maar eigenlijk wil ik het beschikbaar stellen voor iedereen die daarin geïnteresseerd is. En dat betekent dat ik Engels ga praten. So, as from this moment, you have to switch your brains into English mode, which will be a good practice for you all, because this subject, interactive media products, is basically English. Everything is English. Everything you need to know is written in English. All the interesting people in this field speak English, or sort of English in a very strange Japanese accent that nobody can understand, but English nonetheless. So, this is the book. It's also in English, and you will need to buy this book. It's called Designing Interactive Systems, a Comprehensive Guide to HCI, Computer Interaction, and Interaction Design. And it's written by a professor called David Bennion. So you will need to get this book as quickly as possible. I realize now that when I'm speaking English and presenting you this book, I'm also going into official college mode instead of just talking together about it. So I'm now giving a speech. That's interesting. How that works. We will see how this works. Yes, if you,
Have you put the name of the book on SharePoint?
I will put it on the web, on the SharePoint site. And it is also in the slides, which I also will put online. And of course, this whole talk will be online soon, if I figure out how to do that. If you want to ask questions and you think, oh my god, English, please ask your question in Dutch if you want to. If you want to do it in English, that's okay with me. If it's a question that I think that's worthwhile sharing with the rest of the world, I will translate it into Dutch, into English, and then try to answer. Is everybody still with me? Yes? You all see American movie shows on television, and American games and everything. So I think you have less problems with English than I do. Okay. I don't know if you can read it. Very small print, but this is the overview that we are going to do today. And actually today we are going to do an overview of the whole semester and have a quick, at least a quick view of the whole semester. And then I'm going to talk about these things here. So every week I've made a slide and it says things you might find out this week. So you might find out this week about iterative design, what that is and why we do it. You might find out how to define your project. We talked about that yesterday already, like what is the scope of your project, where does it begin, where does it end, and what is the exact problem that you're trying to solve, and how do you find out. We're going to talk about how to get some good ideas. Also, we already did that yesterday. We're going to give a first introduction into the PACT analysis. People, activities, context, technologies. That's a thing that I borrowed from the book. So that's really a method thing that's in the book, so we're going to use that. And I'm going to show you some examples, basically just for fun and for opening up your brain. Some examples of strange things that I saw at a conference where I was 2 weeks ago. I might close the door, because otherwise people think, what's this guy talking English? Strange. So I'm going to show you some examples, and then we will have a look at some further places where you can find more information, because probably this week you want to gather as much information as possible about stuff that you think is relevant for your project. Okay, and I will return to this last bit in the end. What to do, like sort of homework. But the homework is something that we decide together. So if you think, maybe in this first week you will say, okay, the guy said to do this, so we're going to do it. But in later weeks, I hope that you will say, well, we are now very busy with blah, blah, blah. So what we want to do is make a small report on it. And can we then discuss it with you next week? Right? So then I will adapt my program to your needs, to the things that you are engaged with in your project. Right? Everybody still with me? Okay. So, the semester overview. Basically, we have 3 iterations, which means that we're going to do the same project 3 times. And in each iteration, you will make a new version of your final project. And this means that you have the chance, which is not common in the education that you have had so far, you have the chance to really adapt and improve your product after you have been given feedback from the teachers. Right? And it's serious feedback, like not, there are projects in which halfway you can go to a lecture and ask, can I get some feedback? But this is feedback after you really have finished your design. Good morning, please come in this strange new environment. Alright. So, what you all missed is that I'm speaking English, but I won't talk about it anymore, and I'll just do it. So, try to catch up. So, in the first 3 weeks, we have 3 weeks for the first iteration, as it is called. We are talking about, today, we're going to give a basic introduction. In the second week, we're going to speak about some basic design principles for interaction design. Morning, Bas, please switch into English mode. And in the third week, we're going to talk about the user in more detail. This means that the sort of the insights and the knowledge that you will get from the third week, you can't really use them anymore for making your first prototype, but you can use them for evaluating your first prototype. Right? So in the third week, you will learn much more about what users really are, how they work, what kind of strange machines people really are, and how they operate. And you can use that to look back at your own finished prototype and say, well, will users understand my interface? Will they like my interface? Do they want my product? Do they find a need for my product in their work, in their context, etc. Right? Now, in the second iteration, we're basically just going to start all over again. So the first thing what we will do is again look at design and the design space, as it's called. We're already going to practice a little bit with the idea of design space today, but in the second iteration I will dive more deeply into that. And then we're going to start up a user research. So in the first iteration you will do a quick user research, right? You might talk to people a little bit and read something in a book. But then in the second iteration you really have the time to set up a user study. So we're going to talk about that. And in the third week, I've planned it in the third week, but maybe we'll switch it around. We're going to think through, which means not just take the product as it is, but think about it some more. And peel it off, and like look at the inside, what's inside this product. And maybe find out that there's lots of different aspects of this product to be found out, and you can do all sorts of things with it. Right? Now I have to eat it. In the fourth week, we're going to really talk about how do you present your product. Not such that it only becomes a very fancy presentation, but also because presenting your product is actually the last stage of really designing it. Because when you present it, you have to think about, what am I going to show? What am I going to tell? And if you really know very good what your product is, then you also know what you have to tell. But in practice you can turn that around and think, well, even if I haven't finished my product, my idea, my concept, just start about thinking how you will present it. If you give yourself the assignment to present the product, then you will have to think about what the product really is, right? Otherwise you can't show it. So you can use the presentation as sort of the last final phase of being very clear about what your product really is. What is so interesting about it? How does it work precisely, etc. What is the core idea? What are the details that you're not going to present? So that's very important. And then in the 5th week, which is sort of evaluation week, you probably are very busy making the prototype and you don't have much time to talk about the user research anymore. So that should be finished by then. But at that point, we're going to be a little bit philosophical and think about what is this really? Interaction design, user interfaces, where does it come from and where does it go? And that will actually turn back a little bit about some of the things that I will speak about today as well. Am I really being taped? Is it working? Okay, very good. Just check. Now, and then in the 3rd iteration, we have more time. Actually, at the end of this one, you should have a concept, so a product definition that is very clear and is not going to change radically anymore. So that in the last iteration, you really have time to build a good working prototype and to design all the detailed interactions. Right? So at the end of this phase, you will have decided that your product is a coffee maker, such that in the last iteration you have really the time to design all the buttons that go on the coffee maker. Right? And that is something to realize as well, that in most of the projects that you guys do, it is not clear from the beginning that it should be a coffee maker. You've been given assignments, and if you think a little bit about your assignments yesterday, it's not as clear as a coffee maker, right? It's like, in the beginning, it's sort of unclear what it is that you have to make in the first place. Right? So that should be, the first 2 iterations, you probably are busy with thinking about what is it actually that we're making. Is it a game? Or is it an educational tool? Is it a touch table? Or is it a place where people can meet? Or is it, how should we define it? What is the word that defines our thing? And only when you have that at the end here, then you can really start designing the interactions. How do you operate it? And we're going to, in the last iterations, we're also going to do a user research, a user study. But this time, we're going to set up a very good study in the beginning. And we're going to take some time through the weeks, making it a very good experimental design, very good study design. And then in the end, when you have a prototype, you can test it. So in this phase, we're going to do user research, not with the prototype, maybe with the first prototype, but it's not a test of the prototype as such. It's more research into how people live, what they do, what they're thinking about, how the work is organized. So the group that goes into the library, for instance, they will sit there and make field notes about everything that happens in the library and gather information from it that you can use in your design. Whereas in the last iteration, you make your design and then you test it. You test whether the things that you thought should be in the design actually work with real users. Right? And I've put some pictures, I don't know if you can see them, but these are some pictures of how prototypes might look like at the end of the 3rd iteration. So for instance here, people have been working with cardboard and just paper and trying out a multi-touch thing, like you did yesterday. But here, they already, in the first presentation, they already sort of faked the multi-touch table using a real screen, but then somebody else was operating the controls with a mouse. And then they did a small play act, but because it was a real screen, they could present digital images as well. And it looked as if it was really working. And that way, a user or an expert could judge whether this would be a good design or not, even though it was not working in the back office. And here, in the second iteration of these guys, they already had a multi-touch table that was really working, but not all of their functionality that they had designed was in it. So this was more a proof of concept that multi-touch was actually, that they were able to build it. And then in the last iteration, they really made the multi-touch table with the functionalities. And it sort of really worked until they left, which is always the case, as I have said already now for the third time. When the students leave, the prototype falls apart. This is a mystery for me. I will spend the next 10 years trying to find out how that works. Okay? So there's 3 demos, and after each demo, you will get elaborate feedback, and you can use that in the next iteration. If any of you has questions, please ask, and you don't have to ask them in English, you can ask them in Dutch if you want. Don't be ashamed or afraid of anything. Okay. This is the first sketch. Oh, you can really see it. Is this a little bit better? Not really. All right. Well, I have a better version, which is here. So I will talk about this one. That was the first sketch. And I've put in these 2 pictures to show that everything has a first sketch. Right? And then you make a better version. And that's what you guys are going to do. Not with pictures, but with products. So the first product that you deliver is actually sort of a sketch. It's physical, it's 3D, you can move it, there's objects, you can push buttons, but it's a sketch, really. Right? It's as if it's a sketch on paper. A sketch of the interaction. We made a sketch of the program, the teachers, Rob and Peter and I. And that was the first one. And finally we made this version of it. And this year we're going to change it even a little bit again, because this was the process, as we saw it, the design process within each cycle. But we have now tried to move that into the official criteria of the Bachelor of Engineering. We tried to not lose the sort of the interesting part of this. Right? We didn't want to go. We have our own sort of interactive media products vision of things, but we want to connect that to the Bachelor of Engineering, because you guys have to graduate in Bachelor of Engineering, and you have this book called Bachelor of Engineering, and there's also cycles and spirals and blocks and flow diagrams. So you want to map it onto that, and then you can also use that when you graduate, and then you could even use this cycle, but then you would still be sure that it's part of the Bachelor of Engineering program. So I think Rob will talk more about that. I will give you sort of the history of how we first thought about it, and then Rob will probably integrate that into the Bachelor of Engineering, because basically that's what he was doing the last couple of weeks. He was busy with that, so he will probably talk about that Thursday. So, how does it work? Well, it doesn't matter where you start, really. But first you have to think about where you are, if you have been given the assignment. So if you think about your own assignment, then think about, is there already a product that needs to be evaluated before we can start redesigning it? Is there already a solution that hasn't been actually made in order to evaluate it? Right? If somebody has the idea already, but it hasn't been made yet, then first you have to make. Then your product starts with building, and then evaluating. But most projects, and I think all of you, all of the 3, no, there's one, the Friesland table, right? There's a product that you could start with evaluating. At least a little bit. Looking into the documents so far and the last user test that they themselves did, and try to make sense of that. But most projects start with, what is the problem really? What is the challenge? What should we make? What is asked from us as a team? And when you have defined that, then you start to gather information, and that's the thing that broadens up, right? So you get more and more and more information. That's called analysis. Gathering information and making sense of it. And we do that in 2 ways, which I will show later. Then, if you have lots of stuff, very Dutchy. Oh, you have lots of stuff. Hi, people in the world. When you have lots of stuff, and you try to integrate that into, then you have to integrate it into one solution. So that's very important not to stick with 100 ideas here. You have to make lots of ideas here, but then you have to put it together into one solution. Why is that? Does anybody have an idea? Why do you have to make one? And that's not the final product, right? We have circles. But why do you, within these iterations, why do you always have to go to one actual demo of a physical prototype, one idea? This is the thing we've chosen, this is the product we present. Why would that be important? I mean, we could also say, well, in the first 3 weeks you're going to think about 100 ideas, and then we're going to present lots of them. Or you're not going to present the ideas, you're only going to present the general thoughts. Like, all these ideas had something to do with human-computer interaction, and this was important, and this is what we found out. Sort of like a research result. You can present that, but I'm saying that's not going to help you a lot. Why?
The client wants to see something physical.
The client, yeah. Why does the client want to see something physical?
Because he cannot understand your thoughts.
Exactly. So, and the thing is, that doesn't go only for the client. In the end, it also goes for the experts and the teachers. And in the end, it also goes for yourself. If you have something, really made something physical, then you can really start to understand whether the thoughts you were having are actually making any sense in the real world. You can try it out, you can really experience it, and you have something to talk about. I can say, well, this part I like, but I don't like this part. But I cannot point at vague ideas or theories. Right? I can only point at concrete objects.
Well, if you make 2 prototypes, you can compare them. Isn't that...
That's good, but we often do not have a lot of time for it. Ideally, if you have 100 ideas, you would make 100 prototypes and then compare all of them. But what you miss is the integration step that is also necessary in the end. So you can, because if you can really make 3 fully integrated prototypes, that would be good, but basically you don't have the time. But what will happen if you divide your time and you make 3 prototypes is that you don't really make prototypes, but you make one aspect of a prototype in physical form. So then you basically have one idea, one aspect, and one aspect, and one aspect, but you don't have 3 really 3 complete prototypes. And in order to evaluate, it's important to have complete ideas that sort of where different aspects all fit together. I don't know if I'm making lots of sense, but I will think more about your question because it's a good question. I have a very strong feeling that you have to make one integrated product in which you have thought about all aspects that are important in one product, and basically you don't have time to do that 3 times, I think. Okay, so, but maybe other people have other ideas about it. That's also a little bit my vision. So then you have to make it your solution, so to speak, your idea. And you have to give form to it. And when you really start making it, then in this part, you will solve lots of problems that you would never have even thought about if you didn't start actually making it. And these problems, and solving these problems here in this part, will give you lots of information and insight about your project. Right? So if you stop here, you sort of miss a thought process that goes on in actually making it. Then you can evaluate. So you start evaluating here. And I've drawn a sort of diverging line here again, because it means that you create lots of materials again. You have qualitative results of your test, you have quantitative results, you have your own feelings and intuitions, you have group discussion, so you create much, once more. And then you have to take out of your evaluation a central problem, a redefinition of the problem, which is again one thing that you will work on in the next iteration. So if you want to solve all the problems here that you will see, all the details and the big things, then then you don't have any focus in your project. So it's important to converge again. Well, that's basically the thing that you want to do within one cycle. It might be that you go to this stage in the first 3 weeks, and then you will have to start with evaluating in the next iteration. That often happens in practice. Okay, I should have made these slides such that every line comes after another, but we'll go through it from the top to bottom. Well, yesterday somebody asked me, can we speak with the client? Because we really, and Nikki asked it, because we need the table. That's basically what you said. But you need to speak with the client for lots of more reasons than just getting access to the stuff. That's one reason, right? You want to code the software, the details, and but you need to talk with the client for lots of more reasons than only that. The thing is, yesterday you've been given an assignment, but what you really need to understand, very good, is that you don't know what the project is about yet. If you would know what's really important in your project right now, that would be a miracle. And that's not because you guys don't understand or couldn't understand what the client was saying yesterday. You have listened very carefully to the client, you've asked all kinds of questions. But I will give you one example. Yesterday somebody asked, I think it was you, Cyril, you asked about showcase. So the client said we wanted the table to be a showcase, and then you had a different interpretation of what the showcase was. Was it you, or was it somebody else? Oh, it was you, yeah. And then I happened to be there listening and thinking, oh, something went wrong in communication, and then we figured it out. But I would think that there are probably 10 more of these miscommunications that happened yesterday that I didn't hear about, or we didn't have the chance to talk about it some more. Basically, you don't have time in half an hour or in 10 minutes to get everything straight. And that's only on the level of understanding what the other person was saying. Already there, lots of things can go wrong. But then you have the second problem, and that is that the client probably also doesn't know exactly what he wants. The client thinks, we have bought a multi-touch table and we want to do something innovative. What does that mean, innovative? Well, they already bought the multi-touch tables, so they're really innovative. You can just put it there and say, well, really innovative, we bought a multi-touch table. Yeah, but we want a fun thing on it. What does that mean, fun? How is that really going to work for the students? What do students really think is fun? It could very well be that the ideas of the client about fun and engaging and innovative is not what the students think it is, and the students are the people or the teachers that ultimately are going to use the table, and if they're not using it, then the project is not succeed. Right? So the client, him or herself, is also going to learn a lot, and he or she is going to learn a lot because you are going to be busy, you're going to be working on some themes and topics that they themselves have not worked on yet. They only thought about, it's time we do something with a multi-touch table. That's basically where they are right now. So in the next half year, they're going to learn a lot about what you can do with multi-touch tables and why multi-touch tables could be interesting. So actually the end product is not so much a product. It's also an answer to the question that they have. Multi-touch. What to do with it? And you're going to provide that answer. But you can only do that by talking a lot with the client, because as your ideas evolve, the ideas and the knowledge and the insights of the client will evolve as well. So you're both going to go into a sort of learning process. And if you talk a lot, with one another, there will be no real surprises in the end. But if you then look back to the beginning of this project, you will say, wow, we've ended up in a completely different place than where we started. So, first you have to talk again with the client. And try to do that this week. If the people really are busy and you have no access to the client, talk to somebody that is in the neighborhood of the client. Think about how the organization of the client is put up, who are the key figures and players in the organization, and try to get access to these people. And talk to them. Talk to them some more. And don't talk to them completely blank, starting with a blank slate, but already present some ideas. Give some thoughts. Present the ideas that we designed yesterday. And don't say, okay, this is going to be our idea, do you like it? That's not the question. But just say, we want to know more about you. We want to know more about these ideas that you have. But it's difficult to do that with nothing. So we've just made some pictures and we've made some videos. It's just for inspiration. This is not how it should be. It's just for inspiration, but just to get the talk started. Introduce it like that. And then you're going to talk about it. Then you also have to orient yourself. You did that a little bit yesterday by brainstorming, but you can also read a lot about your project. So you have to think about what are the subjects, what are the topics that are relevant and interesting for my project. Everybody think about some subjects. Think about your own project and think, what is a theme? What's interesting? You have some? And you can start browsing on the web. Don't believe Wikipedia all the time. You can use it as an access, but then you want to have some better stuff to really learn something, right? Okay, then you go back and you have another chat with that client. That's what I just talked about. Then, because yesterday we had the project brief, you orient yourself into the subject matter. You gather some information so that you have more knowledge already if you go back to the client. Then you have another chat with the client and you back check your interpretation. So it's very important to say to them in your own words how you think, what you think that the project is all about, and then you check it and you say, is that correct? It's very important. And then you will find out that they will say lots of more stuff. I have to get that out of my speech. Okay, then we're going to explore the design space. I'm going to talk about that. And impact analysis. I'm going to talk about that as well. And then in the end of the 3 weeks, your first prototype is not just a thing, it's also a vision. So your first concept sort of communicates to the client and to the experts, to the teachers, to the other people in your group. It communicates how you think about this project. What you think is relevant in this project. What you think this project is all about. So for instance, if you've been given the assignment by Philips to make a new coffee machine, Philips would not be interested if you just present a coffee machine. But if you present a thing, and you say, well, this is a whole new coffee experience, then you already start to talk about a vision, right? But of course, this is completely empty, right? A coffee experience, that's just marketing talk. So you really have to have some content about what this experience then should be. And you could, for instance, say, well, coffee machines are not about drinking coffee at all. Coffee machines are simply tools that people use to become social with one another. So a coffee machine is a place in a company where you gather around. So what we made is a coffee machine with some extra stuff on it that is really directed towards this social gathering, this informal exchange of information in the company. Because that always happens at the coffee machine, right? At the coffee machine, you really learn what's happening in your company. not in the official board meeting. So we have made a coffee machine that is really not a coffee machine. Well, if you present it like that, then you can still simply show the coffee machine, but then you would have to show how in the coffee machine you show and you communicate that this coffee machine is not a normal coffee machine. That's actually a social mediator or something. And if you do that, then you present not just a product, but a vision, right? So I'm asking you all to present not just a multi-touch table, and not just a funny gadget in the entrance of the building, but present some kind of vision. Why would it be interesting to have this stuff? It takes energy. You have to put batteries in it, or we have to burn up the planet to use this product. So it better be something really interesting and relevant, right? Otherwise it's a waste of energy, of your energy as well. You could have spent your brains on other stuff. Okay, and then you communicate that through the product. It's not just a story and then you can't see it. You have to communicate it through the product. And in the end, you realign again, so you again check with the client, is this sort of the direction that you want us to go? Because we have 2 more iterations. So if you think this is completely not what we had thought about it, say it now. We can still change. This is just exploring. We're just trying out stuff. Talk with us. Right? Okay, I think it's time for a small coffee break. Please gather around the coffee machine, start talking about the really interesting stuff, and we'll be back here in 10 minutes. Right?